Lily lived for her daughter, Claire, with a love that transcended typical parental affection. It was a bond forged through adversity, where Lily, as a single mother, had to navigate life's challenges alone. She had built a life from nothing, working multiple jobs, denying herself personal luxuries, and even foregoing her own dreams to ensure Claire could have opportunities she never had. Claire was not just Lily's child, but her world, her motivation, her anchor in what had once been a chaotic existence. Lily was Claire's rock, her guiding light, always there to provide, protect, and push her towards a brighter future. Claire was a vibrant and spirited young woman, just turning 22. She was filled with the optimism and ambition of youth, dreaming of attending college, pursuing a career in design, and perhaps one day traveling the globe. Her enthusiasm was infectious, but beneath her bright exterior lay the typical vulnerabilities of someone still finding their way in the world. Claire was at a crossroads, eager to explore her independence yet unsure of her path, making her susceptible to the influence and allure of others. Alex entered Claire's life at a mutual friend's party, where his charisma immediately stood out. He was everything Claire had ever hoped for: charming, confident, and surprisingly attentive. His smile was disarming, his laughter infectious, making him the center of attention wherever he went. He had an uncanny ability to make anyone feel special, including Claire, who was quickly swept off her feet. They exchanged numbers that night, and soon their relationship blossomed, marked by constant communication and shared laughter. From the moment she met Alex, Lily felt a twinge of unease. Her instincts, sharpened by years of survival, sensed an underlying arrogance or perhaps danger in Alex despite his outward charm. He was always polite, even respectful, complimenting Lily's cooking or asking about her day, but there was something about the way he looked at people, a subtle dominance that didn't sit well with her. Lily chose to observe silently, not wanting to disturb Claire's newfound happiness, but her protective instincts remained on high alert. As the initial euphoria of their relationship began to fade, Alex's true colors started to emerge. His charm was no longer just endearing, it was a tool for manipulation. His calls to Claire became incessant. If she didn't answer immediately, he'd follow up with a barrage of texts, each one more demanding than the last. He questioned her about every interaction she had, especially with men, under the guise of concern. This behavior was masked by his ability to make her feel uniquely special, yet it was clear to Lily that this was not love, but control. Alex's need to know where Claire was at all times wasn't about care but about possession. He'd show up unannounced at places Claire was supposed to be, which he called surprises, but to Lily it was surveillance. His compliments were double-edged, often followed by remarks that subtly diminished Claire's independence or decisions. Lily noticed how Claire's laughter seemed more forced, her responses to Alex more placating, signaling the beginning of a darker chapter in their relationship. Alex's tactics grew more sophisticated as he began to isolate Claire from her support network. He would subtly criticize her friends, suggesting they were jealous or bad influences, making Claire second-guess her social circle. He'd manipulate situations so that Claire felt she needed to choose between him and her friends or family, and she often chose him to avoid conflict. Claire's social life dwindled. She no longer attended gatherings or went out with friends, fearing Alex's reaction. Her once vibrant social media presence became dormant. Her posts now centered around Alex, showcasing their perfect life. Meanwhile, her dreams and ambitions were sidelined as Alex filled her schedule with activities he approved of, often centered around him. Lily watched as her daughter's world got smaller, her spirit dimming, her laughter less frequent. Claire's independence was being systematically dismantled, her choices reduced to those that pleased Alex. The first confrontation was a moment etched in time, a sharp pivot in the narrative of Lily, Claire, and Alex's lives. It was an evening like any other. The sun had just set, casting long shadows across the living room where Lily sat, her mind ever present on her daughter's welfare. Claire came through the door, but the usual sparkle in her eyes was replaced by a storm of tears. She tried to slip past unnoticed, but the faint blue mark on her wrist caught Lily's eye. The sight was like a punch to Lily's gut. "What happened?" Lily demanded, her voice laced with a protective concern that had simmered below the surface for months. Claire's response was quick, her voice shaky. "It's nothing, Mom. We just had a fight. It's not a big deal." She tugged her sleeve down over the bruise, but her eyes couldn't lie. The pain was there, physical and emotional. Lily's tone sharpened, her voice rising with the urgency of a mother's protective instinct. "Not a big deal. Did he hurt you?" Claire's denial was weak, her words faltering. "No, it's not like that. He didn't mean to. He just got upset, that's all. He apologized right away." The excuses were all too familiar to Lily. She had heard them in her own past, from friends or from the shadows of her previous life. She knew the cycle of abuse well. Taking Claire's hands, her own now trembling with a mix of anger and sorrow, she said firmly, "Listen to me. No one has the right to put their hands on you, no matter how upset they are or how sorry they claim to be afterward." "That is not love." Claire's tears flowed freely now, torn between her mother's truth and her own denial. She wanted to believe in Alex's love, in his potential to change, but Lily's words struck a chord, leaving both mother and daughter in a poignant, painful silence. The confrontation with Alex was inevitable. He arrived the following evening, his usual charm masking the tension in the air. Lily waited for him at the door, a guardian at her post, her eyes hard with resolve. "We need to talk," she said, her voice firm, cutting through any pretense of casualness. "Of course," Alex replied smoothly, his smile an attempt to disarm, but Lily was not one to be swayed by smiles. "What's on your mind?" "I know what happened," Lily stated, her gaze unwavering. "If you ever hurt my daughter again, you'll have me to deal with. Do you understand?" Alex's smile faltered, a brief glimpse of the man behind the mask. But he quickly regained his composure, his voice contrite. "I understand. I would never want to hurt Claire. I love her." Lily didn't believe him, not for a second, but she knew she had to play this carefully. She allowed him in, not for his sake, but for Claire's, knowing her daughter would not forgive her if she drove Alex away without giving him a chance to show change. Yet her protective stance was clear. She had drawn a line in the sand. The period of false hopes was like a deceptive calm after a storm, where the sky clears but the danger of another tempest lurks. After Lily's stern warning, Alex seemed to take it to heart. He was the epitome of the reformed boyfriend, bringing Claire flowers, complimenting her more genuinely, and showing up without the usual possessive undertones. He took her on thoughtful dates, listened to her dreams about design school, and even seemed supportive, a stark contrast to his previous behavior. Lily watched this change with the cautious optimism of someone who has seen too many false dawns. She wanted to believe in Claire's happiness, in the possibility that Alex could truly change. Claire was visibly happier, her laughter echoing through the house again, her eyes brighter. But Lily knew the patterns of abuse. She'd seen how abusers could adapt, becoming superficially better while the core issues remained. This period of false hopes was also a time for Lily to bide her time, to see if Alex was genuinely transforming or merely biding his own. She encouraged Claire to reconnect with friends, to not let her life revolve solely around Alex. However, Lily's trust was not easily won back. She remained observant, her instincts on alert for any sign of the old Alex returning, which, inevitably, they did. The breaking point was not just a moment, but a culmination of all the tension, fear, and love that had built up. It was a sunny day, deceptive in its normalcy, when Lily returned home earlier than expected. As she approached her house, she saw Alex and Claire in the front yard. The scene was charged, with Alex's body language aggressive, his voice raised, and Claire appearing small and defensive before him. The air was thick with tension, and before Lily could reach them, Alex's hand rose and the slap was both audible and visible, a stark violation in the quiet neighborhood. Lily's protective rage was immediate. She stormed towards them, her voice cutting through the air. "What the hell do you think you're doing?" She physically pushed Alex away from Claire, her maternal instincts overriding any semblance of calm. Alex, caught off guard, stumbled back, his expression one of shock and then anger, but he left without a word. Lily wrapped her arms around Claire, who was sobbing, the reality of her situation hitting her hard. "It's over," Lily declared, her voice a mix of fury and sorrow. "You're done with him. He's never coming near you again." But even in that moment, Lily saw in Claire's eyes the conflict, the lingering hope for a love she thought was real, the denial of the truth about Alex. The cycle of abuse that Claire found herself in was both insidious and familiar, a repetitive loop that many victims know all too well but struggle to escape. After the public altercation in the front yard, the initial days were filled with silence, Claire retreating into herself, her mind wrestling with the reality of Alex's violence juxtaposed against her love for him. The cycle began with Alex's apologies, each one more heartfelt than the last, delivered through tearful phone calls and messages. He'd leave voicemails filled with promises of change, of therapy, of a better future. "I love you so much, Claire. I can't stand the thought of losing you. I'll do anything to make this right," he'd say, his voice cracking with emotion. Claire, yearning for the good times, for the love she believed was real, found herself listening, hoping against hope. She started to text him back, first about practicalities, returning his belongings or discussing how they could move forward. But these conversations soon morphed into something more, a rekindling of their connection under the guise of closure. Alex was adept, knowing exactly how to play on her emotions, reminding her of the good moments, the dreams they shared. Lily watched this with a heavy heart, her warnings falling on ears that wanted to hear none of it. She tried to talk to Claire about patterns of abuse, about how love should never hurt, but Claire was in too deep, caught in the cycle where the abuser's love-bombing phase makes the victim doubt their own experiences. Claire argued, "He's different now, Mom. He's really trying to change." But Lily knew change was rare without real introspection and effort, not just words. The cycle continued with Claire giving Alex another chance, the relationship oscillating between moments of tenderness and instances of control, where Claire would find herself justifying Alex's actions, her life becoming more about maintaining his peace than her own happiness. Alex's manipulation was a craft, honed over time, now applied with a surgeon's precision. His jealousy was no longer just about outbursts, it was about subtle control, about making Claire second-guess every interaction. He would ask about her day with a smile, but the questions were leading, probing for signs of disloyalty. He'd glance at her phone screen when she was distracted, asking casually about a name he saw in her notifications. "Who's this?" he'd say, his tone light but his eyes searching. If Claire mentioned a guy friend, even in the most platonic context, Alex would turn it into a question of fidelity, suggesting she should perhaps limit her interactions with men for their relationship's sake. If she was late in responding to his messages, his texts would shift from loving to interrogative. "Why aren't you answering? Are you with someone else?" His accusations were wrapped in concern, making Claire feel guilty for something she wasn't doing. Claire, in her defense of Alex to her mother, would say, "He's just protective because he loves me so much. He's been hurt before." But Lily knew this wasn't protection, it was domination. Alex's jealousy isolated Claire, making her feel like she was the problem, that her freedom was a threat to their love. He would praise her when she complied with his wishes, subtly rewarding her for conforming to his expectations. This manipulation was constant, a drip of doubt and control that slowly eroded Claire's independence, her confidence, and her connections with the outside world. Her world became smaller, her life more about placating Alex than living her dreams. The chill of the evening was biting as Lily sat in her living room, the television murmuring in the background, her thoughts a whirlpool of concern and strategy regarding Claire and Alex. It was a little past 9 when the doorbell rang, its sound cutting through the quiet like a knife. Lily felt a dread settle in her stomach. She knew instinctively it could only be one person at this hour. She opened the door to find Alex, his eyes bloodshot, his posture swaying, the smell of whiskey preceding him. His words were slurred. "I'm here to see Claire," he managed, his voice a mix of belligerence and feigned innocence. Lily, her protective instincts flaring, stood her ground. "She doesn't want to see you. Go home, Alex, you're drunk." Her voice was firm, a barrier of resolve. But Claire, hearing the voice from upstairs, came down, her expression one of conflict. "Mom, it's okay," she said softly, her voice pleading yet resigned. "I invited him over earlier in the week. Please, just let him in. We'll talk and then he'll leave, I promise." Against her better judgment, Lily stepped aside, her heart sinking as she watched Alex stumble into the living room, his presence like a dark omen. The house seemed to shrink with him in it, the air thick with tension. The conversation started somewhat civilly, Alex apologizing, his words dripping with false sincerity, but it didn't take long for his real intentions to surface. The arguments began, escalating from the living room to Claire's room, where Lily heard the unmistakable sound of shouting. She rushed to the room, pushing open the door to find Alex, his face red with anger, holding Claire's phone, accusing her of betrayal based on text messages from a friend named Ryan. The room was chaotic, with Alex's voice raised in anger and Claire's in defense. Lily, with no patience left, intervened. "That's enough," she shouted, stepping between them. She ordered Alex out with a voice that shook with rage, pointing towards the door, her protective motherly instincts fully in command. Alex, realizing he was outmatched, left, his exit marked by the slam of the front door, leaving behind a silence filled with tension and fear. In his drunken fury, Alex, driven by jealousy and the need to control, rummaged through Claire's room, looking for signs of infidelity. Instead, in the depths of her closet, hidden beneath a pile of old clothes, he found a box. Inside was an album, not of family memories, but of Lily's secret past. The photos were startling. Lily in opulent hotel rooms, with men whose eyes spoke of danger, driving luxury cars, and alongside individuals who bore the look of criminals. There were also what seemed to be surveillance photos, hinting at a life of espionage or darker dealings. At first, Alex was confused, his drunken mind struggling to make sense of the images. But as he pieced together the clues, a shocking realization dawned on him. These weren't the pictures of the woman Claire knew as her mother, but of someone who had lived a life of crime, perhaps even violence. He remembered whispers, old news clippings about a female hitman known as the Phantom Widow, always elusive, never caught. Here, in these photos, he saw the connections, the truth of Lily's past life laid bare before him. This discovery was a goldmine. It wasn't just about controlling Claire now, it was about having power over Lily herself. The evening was cloaked in the kind of silence that precedes a storm, the usual sounds of the house muted by the weight of the secret Alex had unearthed. Lily was in the kitchen, the scent of dinner still lingering, when Alex walked in unannounced, his presence like a dark cloud descending. His smile was not of warmth but of triumph, his eyes cold with the knowledge he now wielded. "I know who you really are," Alex began, his words deliberately slow, each one a weapon aimed at Lily's carefully constructed life. He leaned against the kitchen counter, his posture that of someone who had just played a winning card in a game of high stakes. Lily felt her heart sink into her stomach, her mind racing. "I don't know what you're talking about," she replied, her voice betraying none of the panic she felt. "Don't play dumb," Alex sneered, his eyes narrowing as he pulled out his phone, showing her a photo from the album he'd found. "I found the photos, the cars, the money, the people you were involved with. You were someone else before you were Claire's mom, weren't you? The Phantom Widow." His tone was mocking, his words dripping with contempt and the thrill of holding power. "You keep your mouth shut about me and Claire, or I'll make sure she knows exactly who her mother really is. Can you imagine what she'd think, knowing her guardian angel was once a cold-blooded killer?" The threat was clear, a noose around Lily's neck. Every word was a reminder that her past, which she had buried so deeply, could now undo everything she had built for her daughter. Alex's threats weren't just about controlling Claire, they were about subjugating Lily, ensuring she remained silent and compliant. Lily knew this could destroy her relationship with Claire, shatter the trust and love they had. She felt cornered, her protective instincts clashing with the fear of exposure. With each visit from Alex, his threats became more explicit, his control over her life more palpable. She was trapped, her past now a weapon in the hands of an abuser. Lily's days following Alex's blackmail were filled with a quiet desperation, her mind a storm of strategic planning. She knew she needed to act, but every potential move was fraught with peril. She started by observing Alex more closely, noting his habits, his times of vulnerability, looking for any chink in his armor she could exploit. She revisited the legal system in her mind, contemplating consulting a lawyer but under the shadow of anonymity to protect her identity. She researched domestic abuse laws, looking for loopholes or defenses she could use, but each path she considered led back to the risk of her past life being exposed. Lily thought about gathering evidence against Alex, recordings perhaps, or testimonies from others who might have witnessed his abusive behavior. However, this too was risky. It could invite scrutiny she couldn't afford. She considered reaching out to old contacts from her past life, individuals who might owe her favors or have reasons to keep her secrets, but each contact was a potential betrayal of her new life. Her planning was meticulous, almost obsessive. She mapped out scenarios, risks, and outcomes. She watched Alex's movements, his social media, anything that might give her an edge. She contemplated creating a new identity for herself and Claire, a fresh start, but knew that running would only confirm her guilt in Alex's eyes and potentially in Claire's mind. Every night she lay awake, her mind a battlefield of love and strategy, fear and determination. She knew she had to protect Claire, but she also knew that to do so, she might have to confront the very part of herself she had tried so hard to leave behind. The night air was unusually still, the kind of quiet that amplifies every sound, every breath. The house was empty, but for Lily, her solitude filled with the weight of her thoughts, fears, and the constant dread of Alex's next move. It was just past 9 when the doorbell shattered the silence, its tone more like a warning than a welcome. Opening the door, Lily found Alex, his eyes not just glazed from alcohol but burning with a mix of anger and triumph. His stance was unsteady, yet there was a menacing intensity in his gaze. "You thought you could hide forever, didn't you?" he slurred, his voice a mix of accusation and satisfaction. Lily's heart was a drumbeat in her chest, her mind racing through scenarios, but before she could respond, Alex pushed his way inside, his presence filling the small space with darkness. The living room, once a sanctuary, now felt like a cage. "You think you can control everything, Lily?" Alex taunted, his voice rising, echoing off the walls. "But you can't control me. I know who you are, what you've done, and I'm not afraid of you." His words were like acid, eroding the thin veneer of calm Lily had maintained. He brought up Claire, his threats now explicit, suggesting he might hurt her, or worse, reveal Lily's past, destroying the image of her mother in Claire's eyes. "Imagine how she'd feel," he sneered, "knowing her hero was once a monster." The tension was palpable, the air thick with the scent of whiskey and menace. As Alex moved closer, his threats turning into a physical intimidation, Lily's survival instincts from her past life kicked in. She knew this moment, this confrontation, was the culmination of years of fear, secrecy, and the desperate need to protect her daughter. Her mind flashed back to the revolver, a relic of her old life hidden in the kitchen drawer. She moved with a clarity born of desperation, her feet taking her to the drawer, her hand finding the cold metal of the gun. As Alex advanced, his voice now a snarl, his threats about Claire's safety ringing in her ears, Lily, with no other recourse, pointed the gun. There was a moment of stillness, a breath held, then the gunshot shattered the silence. Alex's eyes widened in shock, his hand clutching his chest where the bullet struck, his body staggering back before collapsing to the floor. Lily stood there, the gun still in her trembling hand, her mind reeling with the implications of what she had just done. The sound of the shot seemed to echo endlessly, a marker of the point of no return. She knew this act would change everything, that her life, Claire's life, would never be the same. The protective love for her daughter had driven her to a place of no return, where the past and present collided with a deadly force. The police response was immediate, sirens cutting through the night as officers swarmed Lily's modest home, turning it into a crime scene. The neighborhood was awake, curtains twitching, whispers spreading like wildfire. Detective Richard Hayes arrived, his reputation for solving complex cases preceding him, his eyes scanning the scene with a detective's keenness. He noted the lack of forced entry, the door intact, suggesting this was not an uninvited attack but something more personal. The positioning of Alex's body was off, lying too far from where Lily claimed the confrontation occurred. The blood spatter was inconsistent with a simple self-defense scenario. It suggested movement, perhaps even a struggle before the shot was fired. Hayes ordered a thorough forensic investigation, every detail scrutinized. They photographed the scene, collected fingerprints, and analyzed the bullet trajectory, the shattered whiskey bottle, and the remnants of the phone Alex had thrown in anger. He interviewed neighbors, piecing together the timeline. Alex's arrival, the argument heard through walls, the gunshot. He learned of Lily's protective nature, of the tension between her and Alex, and the rumors about Alex's behavior towards Claire. The detective dug into both Lily's and Alex's backgrounds, knowing the key to understanding this night lay in the past. He sensed there was more than just domestic violence at play. There were secrets, motives beyond the immediate threat. Hayes' approach was methodical, piecing together not just the physical evidence but the narrative of their lives. He knew this case was layered, that beneath the surface was a story of survival, of secrets, and of the lengths one might go to protect their loved ones. The investigation took a sharp turn when Claire was interviewed. Her voice trembled as she spoke of Alex's discovery, something about her mother that had changed everything. This revelation led Detective Hayes to search Alex's apartment, where amidst the clutter of a chaotic life, he found the old photo album and documents hidden away. The photos were damning, Lily in her past life with people whose very presence suggested danger, in settings of luxury that seemed at odds with her current life. There were surveillance photos, hints of a criminal past, a life as the phantom widow, a hit woman whose name was whispered in fear but never caught. Using advanced technology, they matched these old images with recent ones of Lily, confirming her identity. This wasn't just about a mother protecting her daughter from an abusive boyfriend. This was about safeguarding a new life from the shadows of an old one. Hayes understood now. Lily's actions were desperate, a last stand against exposure, against the destruction of her new identity and the relationship with her daughter. The motive became clear. It wasn't just self-defense in the moment, but a defense against years of secrets catching up. This discovery shifted the investigation from a straightforward murder case to one of motive, history, and the moral complexities of redemption and protection. The detectives now had to consider not just the night of the shooting, but the years of secrecy, fear, and survival that led up to it. Lily's trial was the stuff of tabloid dreams, the courtroom packed, the media frenzy turning her life into a public spectacle. Headlines screamed, "Suburban mom" or "Cold-blooded killer." The prosecution painted her as a scheming murderer, using her past life as a hit woman to argue premeditation. They brought up the inconsistencies at the crime scene, the lack of forced entry, and the strategic nature of the shooting as evidence of calculated intent. The defense countered with the narrative of transformation of a woman who had left her dark past behind for the love of her daughter. They argued for self-defense, not just against Alex's immediate physical threat, but against the obliteration of her life's work to protect Claire. They brought in experts on domestic violence, psychologists to discuss the impact of blackmail and control, and character witnesses to attest to her change of heart and life. Claire's testimony was heart-wrenching, her words a plea for understanding, for seeing her mother's actions through the lens of love, fear, and desperation. She spoke of the years of abuse, of the love she had for both her mother and Alex, torn between the two, her voice breaking as she tried to explain the unexplainable. After weeks of testimony, the jury's deliberations seemed endless, the weight of the decision heavy. The verdict came, guilty of first-degree murder, sentencing Lily to life without parole. The courtroom was silent, the finality of the sentence hanging in the air. The aftermath was devastating. Claire, left to pick up the pieces, moved in with relatives, her future forever altered by her mother's past and actions. She carried the burden of public scrutiny, the legacy of her mother's choices, trying to carve out a life where love, trust, and honesty could prevail. Lily, in prison, became a shadow of her former self, refusing interviews, her life now defined by the very act she committed out of love for her daughter. Her story became a cautionary tale, a subject of debate about redemption, the nature of protection, and the haunting reach of one's past. The trial and its outcome left an indelible mark on all involved, a reminder of the thin line between love and destruction, protection and crime.